The morning sun had barely crept over the horizon when Maya Chen arrived at the Naval Special Warfare Training Center in Coronado. At 24, she moved with the deliberate precision of someone who had spent years perfecting every motion of her body. Her short black hair was pulled back in a tight, regulation-perfect bun, and her clothes were simple gray navy PT shorts and a faded blue t-shirt that had seen better days. The only thing that stood out was the slight quiver in her shoulders and the way her hands trembled when she thought no one was watching. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. She had been at pre-buds training for 6 weeks now, always arriving 45 minutes before the mandatory formation time. Thanks to a special arrangement with Commander Marshall, the head of candidate selection, she had been granted the opportunity that many said was impossible, a chance to become the first woman to complete SEAL training, not as a test case or political statement, but as a genuine candidate expected to meet every standard without exception. Most recruits assumed she was some kind of public relations exercise, a token female meant to satisfy congressional pressure rather than a serious contender. Few knew about her background as a decorated Force Reconnaissance Marine or her 3 combat deployments. Even fewer knew about the helicopter crash that had left her with neurological damage that caused her constant tremors, a condition doctors had called permanent and disqualifying for special operations. She never corrected their assumptions. The training compound was her proving ground, the one place where she could either silence the doubts or confirm them once and for all. She had developed a routine during pre-bids: arrive early, complete her specialized physical therapy exercises developed by military neurologists, then run an extra 3 miles while others were still waking up. The tremors never fully disappeared, but the focused physical exertion seemed to calm them to a manageable level. Master Chief Petty Officer William Briggs, the senior instructor and legendary SEAL with multiple combat deployments, had grown accustomed to her determined presence. He watched her from his office window as she methodically worked through her warm-up routine, each movement performed with textbook precision despite the visible tremors. There was something about the way she pushed through the shaking that nagged at him, too disciplined, too focused to be someone just trying to make a political statement. Strange one, that girl, Briggs muttered to himself, noting how she flinched slightly when a door slammed nearby, but immediately resumed her exercises without breaking rhythm. The small medical monitoring device on her wrist was barely visible, but Briggs had noticed it during physical screenings. Though he couldn't quite place the specific technology, he knew it wasn't standard issue equipment. As Maya settled into her first training evolution of the day, her advanced medical monitoring system activated automatically. Professional-grade biometric sensors tracked nerve responses and muscle recovery patterns in real time during physical exertion. The Military Medical Research Program had spared no expense in providing cutting-edge technology to monitor her condition, not out of generosity, but because her case represented valuable data on recovery from combat trauma. The sensors were nearly invisible. Thin strips adhered to her forearms beneath her sleeves, feeding information to the device on her wrist. What nobody at the training center knew was that 6 months ago, Maya's entire body would shake so violently during stress that she could barely stand. The nerve damage from the helicopter crash had been so severe that 3 different military neurologists had told her she would never meet the physical standards required for regular infantry duties, let alone special operations. Yet here she was, slowly but steadily proving them wrong, one painful day at a time. Today should have been like any other pre-buds training day, except for the rumble of vehicles approaching the training area's entrance. 2 navy blue government SUVs pulled up at 06:00 sharp, their presence immediately changing the atmosphere of the usually focused training environment. The doors opened and 8 men emerged, moving with the controlled confidence of apex predators temporarily leashed by training requirements. They wore standard Navy PT gear, but something about their bearing screamed elite special operations. Leading them was Lieutenant Commander James Blackwood, whose squared shoulders and perpetual scowl suggested he viewed any moment not spent in active combat as a personal insult. Behind him, the rest of the team exited their vehicles with practiced efficiency, duffel bags slung over powerful shoulders, eyes scanning the training compound with automatic tactical awareness. Candidate on deck, Senior Chief Ryan Miller muttered to his teammate as he noticed Maya completing her warm-up routine at the edge of the grinder. Why do they let diversity quotas into this program? Politics is going to get someone killed. Blackwood's eyes swept over her dismissively, taking in the slight tremor in her shoulders and the way she had flinched when they slammed their vehicle doors. Probably some admiral's pet project. She wash out in the first hour of real training. His voice carried just enough for Maya to hear, though he pretended not to notice her presence. But Chief Petty Officer Marcus Davidson, older and more observant than his younger teammates, noticed something the others missed. The way she controlled her breathing during her exercises was not random. It was a precise technique taught to snipers and special reconnaissance personnel for managing physical stress. And the calm focus in her eyes wasn't the look of someone playing at being a warrior. It was the steady gaze of someone who had already seen combat. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. As the SEALs set up for their demonstration at the training area, their dismissive comments continued to flow. They weren't meant to be cruel, exactly just the casual arrogance of operators who had forgotten what it was like to be vulnerable. They made jokes about diversity initiatives and political correctness endangering the teams. $10 says, "She doesn't make it through the first evolution of Hell Week," Miller said, loud enough for nearby recruits to hear. 20 says she's crying for her mommy by sunset today, another added with a smirk. Their laughter carried across the training yard, sharp and careless. Maya heard every word. She had learned long ago that the best response to mockery was silence and performance. So she continued her preparation methodically, focusing on controlling her breathing and the tremors that threatened to intensify with her rising stress level. What the SEALs didn't know was that they were about to witness something that would challenge their understanding of what was possible when determination overcame physical limitations. As Maya joined the rest of the pre-buds candidates for morning formation, her hands trembled visibly. She paused, clasping them together behind her back, her lips moving in what looked like a quiet mantra. Then she took her place in formation, back straight, eyes forward, tremors temporarily brought under control through sheer force of will. The morning began with a standard physical screening test, a brutal assessment designed to weed out those who weren't prepared for the demands of buds training. The SEALs had been invited to observe and provide feedback on the candidates, their experienced eyes evaluating each potential future teammate with clinical precision. Maya completed the initial swim qualification with efficient strokes, her time placing her in the middle of the pack respectable, but not exceptional. The SEALs' mockery grew louder when they noticed her hands shaking as she exited the pool. "Look at that. Can't even hold a weapon steady," Blackwood commented. "How's she going to operate in combat if she can't stop trembling during a basic swim test?" The next evolution was the obstacle course, a punishing series of walls, rope climbs and balance challenges that tested both strength and coordination. This is where most expected Maya to fail spectacularly. With her tremors, the fine motor control required for some obstacles seemed impossible. As she approached the course, Master Chief Briggs pulled her aside. "Shun, you don't have to do this today. We can schedule you for a different evaluation." Maya met his eyes steadily. "With respect, Master Chief, I didn't come this far to take alternate paths." Briggs studied her for a moment, then nodded once. "Your call. But if those tremors put you in danger, I'm pulling you off the course." The SEALs gathered near the first obstacle, their conversation just loud enough for nearby candidates to hear. "This should be entertaining," Miller said with a smirk. "Anyone bring popcorn?" Maya approached the starting line, and something changed in her demeanor. The tremors were still visible, but her focus narrowed to the course ahead, her breathing slowing to a controlled rhythm that seemed to momentarily calm the shaking in her hands. She began the course not with the raw power most candidates relied on, but with a calculated precision that spoke of months spent analyzing how to compensate for her condition. Where others attacked the walls with jumping reaches, she used technique and leverage. When facing the rope climb that required grip strength, she employed a modified technique that relied more on leg power and body position than hand strength. Chief Davidson leaned forward, watching her technique with growing interest. "She's not doing it by the book," he said quietly. "Because she can't," Blackwood replied dismissively. "She's working around her weakness." "No," Davidson corrected, his voice thoughtful. "She's adapting. There's a difference." As Maya progressed through the course, her performance wasn't just surprising, it was revelatory. She wasn't the fastest, but her movements displayed an economy of effort and strategic thinking that stood in stark contrast to the brute force approach of many male candidates. Where they exhausted themselves on the first few obstacles, she maintained a steady pace throughout. When she reached the balance logs, usually treacherous for anyone with coordination issues, the SEALs fell silent, expecting disaster. Instead, they witnessed something remarkable. Maya's tremors seemed to momentarily intensify as she stepped onto the log. But then, through some incredible feat of mental control, her body steadied. She crossed with a focus so intense it was almost visible as a physical force. "Master Chief." Briggs, watching from the sidelines, felt recognition dawning. He had seen this kind of focused control before, in combat veterans who had learned to function despite severe PTSD or physical injuries. This wasn't the performance of someone playing at being tough. This was someone who had already been broken and had painstakingly rebuilt herself. In his office later that day, Briggs reached for a secure computer terminal, fingers moving quickly as he accessed Maya's full military record, not the sanitized version in her candidate file, but her complete service history. What he found made his jaw tighten. Marine Force reconnaissance, 3 combat deployments, Silver Star for valor during an operation that remained partially classified, helicopter crash during extraction from a mission gone wrong, severe neurological trauma that should have ended her military career, experimental medical treatment program, and a handwritten note from a Marine Corps general. "If anyone can make it through buds with this condition, it's Chun." As Briggs finished reading, a knock sounded at his door. Commander Marshall entered, his expression serious. "You pulled Chun's full jacket," Marshall observed, glancing at the computer screen. "Her real jacket," Briggs confirmed. "Not the watered-down version we got with her application." "Why wasn't this included?" Marshall closed the door before answering. "Because she asked us not to. She doesn't want special consideration or to be treated differently because of her service record or injury. She's Force Recon with a Silver Star," Briggs said incredulously. "And she's dealing with neurological damage that would have most people medically retired. These SEALs are out there mocking her, and she's just taking it." "That's exactly why she has a chance," Marshall replied. "She's not here to prove anything to them. She's here to prove something to herself." Outside, the SEAL team was conducting a demonstration of close-quarters battle techniques for the candidates. The mood had shifted subtly since the obstacle course. While most still viewed Maya with skepticism, there was a new undercurrent of curiosity in their observations. "The tremors," Davidson said quietly to Blackwood as they watched her taking notes during their demonstration. "They're from combat, aren't they?" Blackwood frowned. "What are you talking about?" the way she handles them. The focusing techniques. That's not someone with a medical condition they've had all their life. That's someone who's adapted to a combat injury. Before Blackwood could respond, an instructor called for volunteers for a hand-to-hand combat demonstration. To everyone's surprise, Maya stepped forward immediately. The SEALs exchanged glances. Miller grinned. This should be good. Blackwood, playing to his audience of admiring candidates, stepped into the training circle. "I'll try not to hurt you," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Just tap out when it gets too much." Maya nodded once, her face expressionless as she took her position opposite him. Her hands were trembling visibly now, whether from exertion, stress, or her condition, no one could tell. "Begin," the instructor called. What happened next stunned everyone watching. Instead of the quick, one-sided takedown everyone expected, Maya moved with startling speed and precision. She didn't try to match Blackwood's strength. Instead, she used his forward momentum against him, executing a perfect redirection that nearly put the surprised SEAL on the ground. Blackwood recovered quickly, his professional pride now engaged. He circled more cautiously, respect beginning to replace his earlier dismissiveness. This time when he moved in, it was with the serious focus he would use with a fellow operator. Maya's hands still trembled, but her footwork was flawless. She evaded his grasp twice, countered with efficient strikes to pressure points, and displayed a fighting style that clearly came from extensive real-world experience rather than just training mats. After 2 minutes of genuine struggle, Blackwood finally secured a takedown, pinning Maya with his superior weight and strength. But the expected easy victory had turned into a legitimate contest that had commanded the respect of everyone watching. As they rose, Blackwood offered a hand. "Where did you learn to fight like that?" "Places you don't want to be," Maya replied quietly, accepting the handshake with a steady gaze. That evening, as candidates prepared for the next day's training, the atmosphere had subtly shifted. The SEALs, scheduled to depart in the morning, gathered in the instructor's office for a final briefing on the candidates they had observed. "Thoughts on the Chen situation?" Commander Marshall asked, addressing the elephant in the room. "She's going to wash out in Hell Week," Blackwood said, though with less conviction than before. "Those tremors will become debilitating under sleep deprivation and cold stress." Davidson cleared his throat. "With respect, sir, I'm not so sure. There's something about her adaptability that's unusual. She's already dealing with a significant disadvantage and performing at standard. That suggests exceptional mental fortitude." "The teams don't need exceptional mental fortitude," Miller interjected. "They need operators who can perform under pressure without physical limitations." Master Chief Briggs, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke. "Gentlemen, I've been running Bud's candidates through training for 15 years. I've seen college athletes and prior service members with perfect physicals quit in the first 24 hours of Hell Week. Physical preparation is only part of the equation." He pulled up Maya's file on the screen, this time showing her complete service record. "What you're looking at is a Marine who served 3 combat tours with Force Reconnaissance. She earned a Silver Star for actions during an operation where she continued to provide covering fire for her team's extraction despite sustaining shrapnel wounds." The room fell silent as the SEALs processed this information. 6 months ago, Chen couldn't hold a pencil steady, Briggs continued. The helicopter crash that ended her Marine career caused neurological damage that doctors said would be permanent and disqualifying for further service. The tremors you've been mocking are actually a 70% improvement from her condition after the crash. Blackwood leaned forward, his earlier dismissiveness replaced by professional interest. "Why, Buds, with that record, she could have taken a medical retirement with full honors." "The same reason any of you would," Marshall answered simply. "Because someone told her she couldn't." As the briefing concluded, Davidson lingered behind. "Master Chief, What are her actual chances of making it through Hell Week? Briggs considered the question carefully. Statistically, almost zero. The cold water immersion alone would typically amplify neurological tremors to debilitating levels. Sleep deprivation will make it worse. The boat carries, the log piton, all of it is designed to break candidates in perfect physical condition. But, Davidson prompted, sensing there was more. But I've been doing this long enough to know that statistics don't account for the human spirit, Briggs replied. And I've never seen anyone work harder to overcome a physical limitation than Chen has these past 6 weeks. Unknown to either of them, Maya was still awake in her barracks, methodically preparing her gear for the coming Hell Week. Her hands trembled as she carefully arranged each item, but there was no hesitation in her movements. On her bunk lay a laminated photograph of her Force Recon Team 5, of whom had not survived the helicopter crash that had left her with permanent nerve damage. She paused in her preparations, placing her palm flat on the bed as the tremors intensified momentarily. Her lips moved in a silent mantra, words she had repeated thousands of times during her rehabilitation. For those who can't, for those who didn't make it back. Tomorrow would bring the beginning of Hell Week, 5.5 days of continuous physical activity, minimal sleep, and constant cold water immersion designed to push human endurance beyond its limits. For most candidates, it would be the most challenging experience of their lives. For Maya, it represented something more profound: redemption, purpose, and the chance to honor the teammates who would never again have the opportunity to push their own limits. What none of them knew, not the skeptical SEALs, not the cautiously supportive instructors, not even Maya herself, was that Hell Week would bring challenges far beyond the standard curriculum. Forces were already in motion that would test not just her physical endurance and ability to overcome her disability, but her capacity to lead when everything fell apart around her. As Maya finally lay down for a few precious hours of sleep before the ordeal began, the tremors in her hands gradually subsided. In these rare moments of physical peace, her mind remained focused on a single thought that had sustained her through months of painful rehabilitation. Sometimes the strongest people are those who have been broken but keep fighting anyway. The SEALs who had mocked her would soon discover exactly what that meant. The 0200 wake-up call for Hell Week came like a thunderclap. Instructors storming through the barracks, metal trash cans clanging against walls, air horns blasting candidates from brief, restless sleep. Maya was already awake. She had been for hours, using the quiet time to mentally prepare and run through her specialized breathing techniques one final time. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. You have 5 minutes to be on the grinder in full gear. An instructor bellowed as candidates scrambled from their bunks. Around her, panic and disorientation set in as sleep-deprived recruits fumbled with equipment and shoelaces. Maya moved with deliberate efficiency, each motion practiced hundreds of times during her preparation. Her hands trembled more violently than usual, a combination of cold, adrenaline, and the early manifestation of physical stress, but she compensated with methodical movements. On the grinder, the infamous concrete training yard where countless SEAL candidates had suffered before her, chaos reigned. Instructors circled like sharks, shouting contradictory commands designed to induce confusion and identify those who would crumble under pressure. Through the madness, Maya found her position, gear perfectly arranged, expression neutral despite the tremors now visible in her shoulders. Master Chief Briggs watched from the shadows, his experienced eyes evaluating each candidate's initial response to stress. Most showed the expected signs: wide eyes, hesitant movements, the bewilderment of men suddenly thrust into controlled chaos. Maya's response was different. The tremors in her hands had intensified, but her eyes remained focused, her breathing controlled. She wasn't experiencing Hell Week for the first time. She was re-experiencing a state of controlled emergency that had become familiar during her force recon deployments. "Boat crews, form up," the command cut through the darkness. Candidates scrambled to organize themselves into 7-person teams, each assigned to carry a 200-pound inflatable boat that would become both their burden and their constant companion for the next 5 days. Maya found herself assigned to Boat Crew 5, a team composed mostly of prior service candidates who had already established a pecking order during pre-BUDS training. Their boat crew leader, former Army Ranger Jackson Mills, gave her a quick nod, neither welcoming nor hostile, just acknowledgement. The others were less neutral, exchanging glances that clearly communicated their doubts about the trembling woman assigned to their crew. "Boat crews in the water, move, move, move." The instructor's command sent candidates sprinting toward the Pacific Ocean, inflatable boats hoisted overhead. The pre-dawn air was bitter cold, but the real shock came when they hit the water 58 degrees of numbing reality that instantly separated those with mental fortitude from those who had merely talked a good game. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The ocean hit Maya like physical pain, immediately amplifying her tremors to a level she hadn't experienced in months. For one terrible moment, panic threatened to overwhelm her as her body remembered the helicopter crash, the cold water filling the cabin, the desperate struggle to free her trapped teammates. She forced the memories down, focusing instead on the methodical breathing pattern her neurologist had taught her. 4 counts in, hold for 7, 8 counts out, repeat. "Chun's vibrating like a damn phone," muttered Thompson, a former Marine, to her right. "She's going to drag us down." "Less talking, more paddling," Mills responded curtly. "Everyone pulls their weight or we all suffer." The first evolution was a 2-mile ocean swim, followed immediately by a beach run with boats overhead. Under normal circumstances, it would have been merely exhausting. In the pre-dawn darkness, with water temperatures triggering nerve responses that intensified Maya's tremors, it became an exercise in sheer willpower. Each stroke required conscious control, each step on the beach a deliberate command to muscles, threatening rebellion. What her boat crew couldn't see was the data streaming from her medical monitor's information that would have told them her body was operating well beyond normal stress parameters. The specialized sensors tracked her neurological responses, heart rate variability, and muscle control, feeding information to medical researchers monitoring select candidates during Hell Week. The scientists had predicted her tremors would become debilitating within the first 12 hours. They were about to learn how thoroughly Maya Chen could defy medical expectations. By sunrise, 3 candidates had already rung the bell, the brass instrument that, when struck, signified surrender and the end of a SEAL candidate's journey. Maya had expected more dropouts this early. The retention rate spoke to the quality of this particular class, or perhaps to their stubborn pride, which would make the coming brutality even harder to endure. "Sugar cookies," an instructor bellowed as they returned from their ocean swim. The dreaded evolution required candidates to roll in the sand until completely covered, then immediately return to the frigid ocean, creating a mixture of wet sand and salt that chafed skin raw within. Hours. For someone with neurological tremors, the combination of cold water immersion followed by abrasive sand created a special kind of torment as nerve endings fired chaotically. Maya's medical monitors registered the spike in neurological stress, data points shooting beyond predicted tolerance thresholds. In the monitoring station, researchers exchanged concerned glances. "Her readings are off the charts," observed Dr. Winters, the lead neurologist assigned to the experimental program. "We should pull her before permanent damage occurs. Protocol states she continues until she wrings out or physically collapses." His colleague Dr. Mercer reminded him, though his expression reflected similar concern. "That was the agreement. She doesn't want special treatment." Back on the beach, Boat Crew 5 struggled through their sugar cookies, each member in various states of controlled suffering. Mills performed with machine-like efficiency, his ranger. Training evident in every movement. Thompson and Rodriguez, both former Marines, followed close behind in performance. The others, Harrison, Patel, and Watson, were holding their own, but showing early signs of the exhaustion that would eventually become overwhelming. Maya completed each evolution precisely as instructed, her movements economical despite the visible tremors. What her teammates couldn't see was the elaborate system of mental compartmentalization she had developed during rehabilitation, the ability to separate physical pain and neurological misfiring from the cognitive functions needed to complete tasks. Her body might shake, but her mind remained steady. As morning progressed into afternoon, the instructors increased the pressure. Log PT exercises performed while hoisting massive telephone poles pushed candidates to their physical limits while testing team coordination. For Maya, the challenge wasn't just the crushing weight, but maintaining her grip, despite tremors that intensified with each passing hour. Chun's losing her grip. Harrison called out as they raised the log for the 30th shoulder press. Left side. Maya gritted her teeth, summoning reserves of strength that went beyond muscle. Her technique changed subtly where others relied on grip strength. She positioned her trembling hands to use skeletal support and body mechanics rather than fine motor control. The log stayed up. By mid-afternoon, 12 more candidates had rung the bell. The instructors circled Boat Crew 5 with particular attention, their eyes frequently settling on Maya. She had become something of a curiosity, the trembling candidate who, despite all physical indicators suggesting imminent failure, continued to perform at standard. What's your motivation, Chun? Instructor Ramirez demanded during a rare 2-minute water break. Why put yourself through this when you've already got a silver star and a medical reason to be anywhere but here? Maya met his eyes steadily, despite the tremors that ran visibly through her shoulders. My teammates can't be here, instructor. I'm carrying them through. Ramirez's expression remained hard, but something flickered in his eyes' recognition. Perhaps of the kind of motivation that couldn't be broken by physical discomfort. He nodded once and moved on to harass the next candidate. The brutal pace continued as day turned to evening. Beach runs gave way to more ocean swims, followed by crawling exercises through mud flats that reduced candidates to shivering, filthy shadows of themselves. Through it all, Maya's tremors remained visible but controlled. Her performance neither the best nor the worst in her boat crew. She simply endured, hour after hour, pushing through thresholds that her doctors had deemed physically impossible. During a particularly grueling Zodiac boat paddle through high surf, Thompson, who had been among the most skeptical of Maya's capabilities, found himself struggling to maintain his position as waves crashed over the gunnel. I can't feel my hands, he gasped, his grip on the paddle slipping. Without hesitation, Maya shifted position, using her body to stabilize his section of the boat while still managing her own responsibilities. 4-count breathing, she instructed him during a momentary lull in the instructor's shouting. 4 in, hold 7, 8 out. Focus on the counting, not the cold. Thompson gave her a surprised look, but followed the instructions. His performance stabilized. Back at the monitoring station, the medical team watched Maya's data with growing amazement. After 18 hours of continuous physical activity in cold water conditions, her neurological readings showed adaptation patterns that defied their models. She's rewiring neural pathways in real time, Dr. Winters observed, pointing to patterns on the screen. Look at this compensation mechanism when the primary motor pathways show interference from the tremors. She's routing commands through secondary pathways. I've never seen anything like it. The question is how long she can maintain it, Dr. Mercer replied. Even the most remarkable adaptation has limits. The sun set on the first day of Hell Week, but the pace only intensified. Night brought new challenges: land navigation exercises performed in pitch darkness, more ocean swims in water that seemed impossibly colder than during daylight hours, and the first real effects of sleep deprivation. Candidates began to show the 1,000-yard stare of extreme fatigue, movements becoming sluggish, attention wavering. Maya's tremors had settled into a consistent pattern, worst immediately after cold water immersion, gradually becoming more manageable during land exercises, then intensifying again with the next water evolution. What became apparent to those watching closely was that she had developed a precise understanding of this cycle and adjusted her techniques accordingly, conserving energy when the tremors were manageable and using specialized techniques when they peaked. At midnight, Boat Crew 5 faced their first real crisis. During a brutal log PT session, Watson, the youngest and least experienced member of their crew, hit his breaking point. His form collapsed, dropping his portion of the carved log and nearly causing a dangerous accident. "Get your shit together, Watson," Mills barked as they struggled to stabilize the massive wooden pole. "I can't." Watson's voice cracked, his eyes showing the first signs of the psychological break that often preceded quitting. The instructor, circling their boat crew, sensed weakness and moved in. "Is Boat Crew 5 about to lose a man? Who's the weak link? Identify him now." Maya caught Watson's eye as they struggled with the log. Rather than add to the pressure, she demonstrated the breathing pattern she'd been using, an exaggerated version visible even in the darkness. Watson instinctively mimicked her, his panicked breathing gradually coming under control. "Switch positions," she said quietly but firmly. "Take my spot for the next 10 reps. Mills shot her a questioning look, but nodded approval. The position swap put Maya at the heaviest part of the log, where Watson had been struggling, and gave him a slightly more manageable section. Her tremors intensified under the increased load, but her technique remained sound. Watson's performance stabilized. The midnight crisis passed, but it marked a turning point in how Boat Crew 5 viewed their trembling teammate. Something subtle shifted in their dynamic, not quite acceptance, but a growing recognition that Maya's presence might be an asset rather than a liability. By the 36-hour mark, Hell Week had claimed nearly 40% of the starting class. The remaining candidates moved like zombies between evolutions, functioning on autopilot as sleep deprivation took its toll. Medical teams circled constantly, pulling candidates who showed signs of dangerous hypothermia or injury. 3 had already been hospitalized, a normal attrition pattern for the famously brutal training. Maya's medical monitors continued to transmit data that confounded the research team. Her tremors remained significant, but had established a predictable pattern that she seemed to work around with remarkable adaptability. More surprisingly, her core temperature and vital signs showed better stability than many candidates without neurological issues. "She's using the tremors," Dr. Winters realized suddenly. "The involuntary muscle contractions are generating heat. She's somehow turned her disability into a thermoregulatory advantage." The second night brought the dreaded surf torture, candidates lying in the surf zone as frigid waves washed over them for extended periods, broken only by brief exercises to prevent hypothermia. It was during this evolution that the instructors typically saw the highest quit rate, as the combination of bone-chilling cold and exhaustion broke even the most determined spirits. Boat Crew 5 lay shoulder to shoulder in the surf, shivering violently as waves crashed over them. Maya's tremors had become almost indistinguishable from the shivering that afflicted everyone, her specialized breathing now the only visible indicator of her condition. "Time check," Mills gasped between waves, trying to maintain his crew's morale. 37 minutes in, Maya replied, her voice steady despite the cold. "Focus on your breathing, not the clock. How are you so calm?" Rodriguez demanded, teeth chattering so violently he could barely form words. "I'm not," Maya admitted. "My body's screaming just like yours." The trick is remembering it's just information, not commands. Beside her, Watson had gone quiet, a dangerous sign during cold exposure. Maya nudged him. Tell me about your hometown. One fact, keep talking. To Texas, Watson stammered. San Antonio. What's the best food there? One dish. Focus on describing it. This simple technique, keeping the mind engaged with specific, manageable tasks, was something Maya had learned during her rehabilitation. As Watson struggled to describe his grandmother's enchiladas, his circulation improved slightly, buying precious minutes of cold tolerance. The pattern continued through the night and into the third day, Maya sharing subtle techniques with her. Boat crew breathing patterns, visualization exercises, focus techniques that she had developed to manage her condition. None of these methods eliminated the suffering, but they provided a framework for enduring it more effectively. By the 72-hour mark, Boat Crew 5 had emerged as one of the strongest remaining teams. Their performance during evolutions remained consistent, while other crews showed significant degradation. More surprisingly, they had retained all 7 original members, while most crews had lost at least one to injury or quitting. Master Chief Briggs observed this development with professional interest. Boat 5 is outperforming expectations, he noted to Commander Marshall during a brief supervision handoff. Chen seems to be a stabilizing factor rather than a weakness. Interesting development, Marshall agreed. The tremors? Still present, sometimes severe, but she's adapted. More importantly, she's helping others adapt to their own suffering. Different techniques than we typically see. Marshall nodded thoughtfully. Sometimes the best teachers are those who've had to learn the hard way. The fourth day of hell. Week brought a new challenge, a 20-mile beach run with boats overhead, performed after nearly 80 hours without proper sleep. Under these conditions, hallucinations became common, and even the strongest candidates struggled with basic coordination. 2 miles into the run, disaster struck Boat Crew 5. Patel, who had been performing admirably despite no prior military experience, stepped into an unseen depression in the sand. His ankle twisted with an audible pop, and he went down hard, dropping his portion of the boat. The heavy inflatable crashed onto Maya's shoulder as the crew lost balance, driving her to her knees in the wet sand. Pain flared instantly sharp and localized in a way that indicated genuine injury rather than just muscle fatigue. The medical monitors recorded the spike, sending immediate alerts to the observation team. Chen's showing signs of clavicular injury, Dr. Winters reported, studying the incoming data. Significant pain response, possible fracture. Instructor Ramirez was at their position within seconds. What's the holdup, Boat 5? Patel's ankle, sir, Mills reported crisply. Appears broken or severely sprained. Ramirez examined the injury quickly and signaled for medical evacuation. But there was a new twist that sent murmurs through the exhausted candidates. Listen up, Instructor Ramirez bellowed. This evolution includes a leadership assessment component. Each boat crew will rotate crew leaders every 3 miles during the paddle. Performance evaluations will affect your individual standings. For Maya, this announcement triggered the first genuine anxiety she'd felt since Hell Week began. Physical challenges she could overcome through sheer determination and the specialized techniques she'd developed during rehabilitation. Leadership evaluation meant potential exposure of her greatest concern, that her visible tremors would undermine others' confidence in her command abilities. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Chen, you'll take third rotation, Mills informed her as they prepared their Zodiac for launch. The assignment wasn't random. The third rotation would place her leadership during what was typically the most challenging section of any long paddle, when fatigue had fully set in but the end remained distant. Maya nodded acceptance, her face betraying nothing of her internal apprehension. The tremors in her hands were particularly pronounced this morning after the brief rest had allowed cold and fatigue to settle into her muscles. She tucked her hands into her wetsuit briefly, using the pressure to momentarily reduce the visible shaking. The paddle began like most Hell Week evolutions, with controlled chaos and maximum physical stress. The instructors circled in patrol boats, shouting contradictory commands and occasionally creating artificial hazards by crossing directly in front of the Zodiacs, forcing emergency maneuvers that drenched already miserable candidates in freezing spray. Maya focused on the mechanical aspects of paddling, using the techniques she had refined over the previous days to maintain effectiveness. Despite her tremors and injured shoulder, she positioned her hands on the paddle to leverage body weight rather than grip strength, adjusted her stroke to favor her left side while still maintaining minimum required output from her right, and maintained the breathing pattern that helped manage the pain. 3 miles in, Thompson took over leadership from Mills, demonstrating the practical, no-nonsense approach of an experienced Marine. He kept commands simple and predictable, maximizing the crew's diminished energy reserves through efficient paddling techniques. Under different circumstances, it would have been a textbook performance of small unit leadership. But this was Hell Week, and the instructors ensured nothing remained simple for long. Halfway through Thompson's leadership rotation, Instructor Williams pulled alongside in a patrol boat. "Simulated casualty," he shouted, pointing at Rodriguez. "Man down with spinal injury. Manage the situation while maintaining forward progress." Thompson responded with practiced efficiency, redistributing paddling responsibilities and positioning Rodriguez in the center of the Zodiac where he could be stabilized. Their forward speed decreased but remained within acceptable parameters. It was a solid professional response to a tactical challenge. 6 miles in, with Rodriguez still designated as a simulated casualty, Maya took command. The timing couldn't have been worse. Her tremors had intensified after hours of cold water exposure, and the pain in her shoulder had reached a level that even her compartmentalization techniques couldn't fully manage. As she called her first commands, her voice shook slightly with the effort of controlling her physical symptoms. "Thompson, take forward port position. Watson and Harrison, power positions mid-boat. Mills, keep us on heading 270. Her commands were technically perfect, concise, specific, and tactically sound. But the visible tremor in her hands as she gestured raised subtle looks of concern among her crew. Within minutes, the instructors escalated the challenge. A second patrol boat pulled alongside, Instructor Ramirez grinning with predatory enthusiasm. "Environmental change," he announced. "You've just entered hostile waters. Small arms fire. Coming from the coastline to your north. Multiple casualties probable. React accordingly while maintaining your navigation objective." This scenario created an immediate leadership crisis. With Rodriguez already designated as a casualty and limited personnel available, Maya needed to balance tactical response, crew safety, and mission objectives simultaneously, all while managing the Zodiac with compromised manpower through increasingly rough seas. For a critical moment, Maya froze. Not from indecision, but from the sudden intensity of a flashback: the helicopter crash, the cold water, the desperate struggle to extract injured teammates while under fire. Her tremors visibly intensified, hands shaking so violently that she momentarily lost her grip on the paddle. Watson noticed immediately. "Chun, you good?" His voice carried concern rather than judgment. The question snapped Maya back to the present moment. She took one deep breath, employing the grounding technique her trauma therapist had taught her. 5 things she could see, 4 she could feel, 3 she could hear, 2 she could smell, 1 she could taste. The salt air, the cold rubber of the Zodiac, the rhythm of waves against the hull. "Change formation," she commanded, her voice steadier than her hands. "Echelon pattern, lowest profile toward north shoreline. Thompson, you and I will maintain minimum forward progress while Watson, Harrison, and Mills provide paddling cover. For Rodriguez, alternate breathing cycles, 3 paddlers active while 2 recover, rotating every 30 seconds. The command structure was unorthodox but tactically sound, an adaptation of small unit movements she had learned in Force Recon, modified for their current limitations. More importantly, it accounted for their diminished strength after nearly 5 days of continuous exertion, providing sustainable effort rather than a burst of speed that would leave them depleted. Mills caught her eye, a flash of professional recognition passing between them. The formation she had called was not standard Bud's training doctrine. It was advanced small unit tactics adapted to their waterborne environment. She wasn't just managing the immediate challenge. She was demonstrating operational thinking that went beyond the training scenario. Execute, Mills confirmed, helping reposition the crew according to her instructions. The patrol boats circled, instructors watching with professional interest as Boat Crew 5 adapted to the simulated threat environment. Maya continued issuing commands, her tactical decisions reflecting both formal training and hard-won combat experience. Despite her trembling hands, or perhaps because she didn't waste energy trying to hide them, her leadership remained clear and effective. When Instructor Ramirez added the final complication, a simulated engine failure that required them to recalculate navigation while paddling through a strong crosscurrent, Maya displayed the kind of adaptability that defines successful special operations personnel. Rather than fighting the current directly, she adjusted their heading to use the natural water flow, reducing the physical burden on her already exhausted crew. Smart, Thompson muttered as they maintained forward progress with minimal additional effort, using the environment instead of fighting it. 9 miles in, as Mills resumed command for the final rotation, Instructor Ramirez pulled alongside one last time. Instead of adding another complication, he simply observed for several minutes, his expression unreadable. Then, with a curt nod that might have been grudging approval, he accelerated away. When they finally reached shore after 15 grueling miles, the candidates collapsed on the beach, muscles quivering with exhaustion. Maya's tremors were now indistinguishable from the physical fatigue affecting everyone. She sat with her crew, carefully stretching her injured shoulder while the instructors conferred nearby. "Chun," Instructor Ramirez called, approaching their position. "Medical evaluation, now." Maya rose stiffly, expecting to be pulled from training despite having completed the evolution. Instead, she found Commander Marshall waiting with the medical team, his expression thoughtful as he reviewed the data from her monitors. "Your neurological readings are concerning," he stated without preamble. "The combination of sleep deprivation, cold exposure, and physical exertion has amplified your tremor patterns beyond baseline levels." Maya stood at attention despite her exhaustion. "I can continue, sir." Marshall studied her for a moment. "This isn't about can or cannot candidate. We're gathering data on performance under extreme conditions. Your participation has provided invaluable information about adaptive response to neurological limitations." He turned to Dr. Winters, who held the tablet displaying Maya's medical data. "Is she at risk of permanent degradation beyond her existing condition?" The neurologist hesitated. "Not immediately, but we're in uncharted territory. Her adaptation patterns suggest remarkable neuroplasticity, but there are theoretical limits to how long such compensation mechanisms can be maintained." Marshall turned back to Maya. "You have a choice, candidate. Medical will clear you to continue if that's your decision, but no one would question a medical evacuation at this stage, given your performance thus far and documented injury." For the first time in 5 days, Maya allowed herself to consider the alternative, to accept the medical evacuation that had been available since her shoulder injury, to acknowledge the extraordinary effort she had already demonstrated, to rest. The temptation was powerful, a siren call to her exhausted body and mind. Instead, She thought of her force recon team, of Jenkins who had died still strapped in the helicopter, despite her desperate attempts to free him, of Rodriguez who had pulled 3 teammates to safety before succumbing to his own injuries, of Captain Lin who had maintained command presence even as the life drained from her body. "I'll continue, sir," Maya said simply. Marshall nodded once, as if her answer confirmed something he already knew. "Rejoin your boat crew. The land navigation exercise begins at sunset." The brief reprieve for medical evaluation had allowed Maya's crew time to rehydrate and consume the meager rations provided during Hell Week. When she returned, Mills gave her a questioning look. "Still with us?" he asked. "Still with you," she confirmed, accepting the energy bar Thompson silently offered. Watson, who had been the most visibly doubtful of her capabilities during the early days, spoke up unexpectedly. "Your formation adjustment during the casualty scenario. That wasn't standard training doctrine." Maya took a careful bite of the energy bar, buying time as she considered her response. "Force recon adaptation of MARSOC's small unit tactics," she finally admitted. "We used it during contested extractions when standard formations weren't viable." "You've seen combat," Mills stated rather than asked. Maya nodded once, offering no further elaboration. Her service record might be available to the instructors, but she had no obligation to share her experiences with fellow candidates. Yet something had shifted in their dynamic after the leadership evolution, a recognition that her presence wasn't just about a woman attempting to complete SEAL training, but about an experienced combat veteran bringing valuable operational perspective. The land navigation exercise began at sunset as promised, with each boat crew assigned different checkpoints throughout unfamiliar terrain. Normally, this evolution tested basic skills, compass reading, terrain association, pace counting. But after 5 days of continuous physical activity and sleep deprivation, it became a serious challenge to maintain even basic cognitive functions. Maya's tremors had settled into a predictable pattern, worst after cold exposure and improving slightly during sustained land movement. The shoulder pain remained constant, a sharp counterpoint to the deeper ache of muscles pushed far beyond normal endurance limits. More concerning was the increasing frequency of micro-hallucinations, momentary visual distortions at the edges of her vision, common during extreme sleep deprivation. 2 hours into the land navigation exercise, boat Crew 5 encountered their first significant challenge. The terrain, unfamiliar and navigated in near darkness, proved more complex than the map indicated. A checkpoint that should have been easily located remained elusive despite careful compass work. "We're off by at least 400 meters, Mills concluded, after their second failed search pattern. "Either the map is deliberately inaccurate, or we've made a consistent error in our navigation." The situation carried echoes of combat missions gone awry, planned insertions that encountered unexpected terrain features, maps that failed to capture critical details, time-sensitive objectives compromised by navigation challenges. Maya felt a familiar clarity emerging from the fog of exhaustion, the same operational focus that had kept her alive during compromised missions. "May I?" she asked, gesturing toward the map Mills held. He handed it over without hesitation, another indication of how their dynamic had evolved since the early days of skepticism. Maya studied the map carefully, comparing terrain features to their surroundings, then closed her eyes briefly, visualizing their movement since the previous checkpoint. "The map is accurate but incomplete," she concluded. "There's a seasonal drainage feature not marked, probably only appears during the rainy season." She pointed to their west. "We need to move 200 meters in that direction, then reassess." Watson frowned. "How can you be sure?" "It's practically pitch black. Different texture to the soil where we're standing," Maya explained. "Indicates periodic water flow. I felt the gradient change about 300 meters back. It was the kind of environmental awareness that came from high-level reconnaissance training. the ability to read terrain through multiple senses, to feel subtle changes that others might miss. More importantly, it demonstrated the kind of adaptability that defines successful special operators, using available information to solve problems when standard approaches failed. Mills made the decision. We'll try Chun's approach. Thompson, take point. The adjustment proved correct. Within 20 minutes, they located the elusive checkpoint, confirming Maya's terrain analysis and putting them back on schedule for the evolution. More importantly, it established a new pattern for their team, leveraging each member's specialized skills rather than defaulting to conventional approaches. As the night progressed, Boat Crew 5 developed an operational rhythm that set them apart from the remaining teams. Where others struggled with the compounding effects of exhaustion and cognitive degradation, they established a rotation system that allowed brief recovery periods for each member while maintaining forward progress. Maya's techniques for managing physical limitations, the breathing patterns, the focus exercises, the compartmentalization of pain, became shared tools that enhanced their collective performance. By the time they reached the final checkpoint, shortly before dawn, something remarkable had happened to Boat Crew 5. They had transcended the normal parameters of a training unit and begun operating with the integrated efficiency of an actual tactical team. Each member's strengths compensated for another's limitations. Communication had distilled in essential information delivered precisely when needed, and collective focus remained fixed on mission accomplishment rather than individual discomfort. As they approached the final rally point where all boat crews would reconvene, Instructor Ramirez waited alone, his silhouette backlit by the first hints of approaching dawn. His expression revealed nothing as he checked his watch. "Time," he announced as they came to a halt before him. Mills provided their checkpoint verification codes in the proper sequence, confirming they had completed the entire course as required. Ramirez checked his roster, made a brief notation, then looked up with the same impassive expression he had maintained throughout Hell Week. "Boat Crew 5, you are the first team to complete the land navigation exercise. You have done so in record time." The words were delivered without congratulation or approval, simply a factual statement. Medical evaluation for all candidates. Then prepare for the final evolution. As they moved toward the medical station, Thompson fell into step beside Maya. "Your tremors are worse," he observed quietly. Maya nodded once, not wasting energy. On denial, the combination of extreme fatigue, pain from her shoulder injury, and the cumulative stress of 5 days without proper sleep had indeed intensified her neurological symptoms. Her hands shook visibly even at rest, and the tremors had spread to her shoulders and occasionally her legs during periods of maximum exertion. "Will they pull you?" Thompson asked, a new note of concern in his voice. "Not unless I can't continue," she replied with simple certainty. The medical evaluation was thorough but swift: blood pressure, heart rate, core temperature, and basic neurological checks. The team paid particular attention to Maya's shoulder and tremors, comparing current readings to her baseline data. Dr. Winters frowned at what he saw but made no immediate recommendation for her removal. "Your readings suggest you're operating well beyond normal human endurance parameters," he told her quietly. But then, that's been true since day 3. The final evolution of Hell Week was announced as candidates finished their medical screenings. A combined land and water course that would test every skill they had practiced throughout the week. Teams would navigate from the beach through a series of obstacles, conduct a simulated building clearing operation, then return through the surf to complete the challenge. "This is the culmination of everything you've learned," Instructor Williams announced. "Performance here determines whether you've truly earned the right to continue SEAL training. Any mistakes, any failures, any hesitation will result in immediate removal from the program." The stakes could not have been clearer. After 5.5 days of continuous physical activity, with bodies pushed far beyond normal human endurance. Limits and minds clouded by sleep deprivation, candidates would now face a comprehensive test of everything they had suffered to learn. For Maya, the challenge represented more than just the culmination of Hell Week. It was the final validation of her belief that physical limitations, even those as visible and potentially debilitating as her tremors, could be overcome through adaptation, specialized techniques, and sheer force of will. More importantly, it would determine whether the bonds forged within Boat Crew 5 during their shared ordeal would translate into effective tactical performance. As they prepared for the final evolution, Commander Marshall approached with Master Chief Briggs. Rather than addressing the entire group, they moved directly to Maya's position. "Candidate Chen," Marshall began without preamble, "medical has expressed concerns about your current condition. Your neurological readings indicate potential for long-term complications if you continue at current exertion levels." Maya stood at attention despite the visible tremors in her hands and the pain evident in her rigid posture. "I can complete the evolution, sir." Marshall exchanged a glance with Briggs, some unspoken communication passing between them. Then he turned back to Maya with an unexpected question. "Why are you here, Chen, really? Not the recruitment poster. Answer, not what you think we want to hear, the truth." The question caught her off guard, penetrating the carefully maintained facade of professional detachment she had worn throughout Hell Week. For a moment, the accumulated exhaustion, pain, and emotional weight of the past 5 days threatened to overwhelm her carefully constructed defenses. "Because I made a promise," she finally answered, her voice steady despite the tremors in her body. "When the helicopter went down, I was the only one who walked away. Rodriguez, Jenkins, Lynn, Westover, Mitchell, they died while I lived. Before we lost radio contact, Captain Lynn's last order was finish the mission. This is me finishing." Marshall nodded once, as if her answer confirmed something he already suspected. "Medical will continue monitoring your condition during the final evolution. You may proceed with your team." As they walked away, Briggs spoke quietly to Marshall. "Think she knows? That we've been testing her specifically?" "No, and that's exactly why she's going to make it." The final evolution began at precisely 06:00 on the 6th day of Hell Week. The remaining candidates now reduced to just 19 from the original 83 assembled on the beach. Each boat crew a hollow-eyed, salt-crusted shadow of the eager trainees who had begun the journey nearly 6 days earlier. Maya stood with Boat Crew 5, her tremors now a constant companion, but her determination undiminished. The medical monitoring team had attached additional sensors to track her neurological responses during this final challenge, but she barely noticed the extra equipment. Her focus had narrowed to a laser-sharp point: complete the evolution, honor. Her fallen teammates proved that limitations could be overcome. What none of the candidates knew was that this final test had been specifically modified after observing Maya's performance throughout Hell Week. The standard culmination exercise had been enhanced with elements designed to test adaptive response, rather than just physical endurance. Precisely the kind of challenge that would determine whether her methods for overcoming physical limitations could translate to operational capability. As the instructors gave the command to begin, Boat Crew 5 moved as a single unit toward the first obstacle, a series of underwater tunnels, requiring breath control and confidence under extreme conditions. The test had been deliberately engineered to amplify Maya's neurological challenges, as cold water immersion consistently triggered her worst tremors. Yet what happened next would ultimately redefine the training program's understanding of operational capability under adverse conditions. Rather than being hindered by her tremors, Maya had integrated them so completely into her operational approach that they had become almost irrelevant to her performance. More importantly, the techniques she had developed to manage her condition had spread throughout Boat Crew 5, creating a team that functioned effectively despite injuries, exhaustion, And the extreme conditions of Hell Week, the final challenge, awaited, and with it, the true test of whether a woman with trembling hands could not only survive SEAL training but excel beyond expectations. The underwater tunnels loomed before Boat Crew 5 like the entrance to some mythological underworld, dark, forbidding, and designed to exploit primal human fears. Normally, each candidate would navigate the tunnels individually, but Maya immediately recognized the tactical inefficiency of this approach given their depleted physical state after nearly 6 days of continuous exertion. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Buddy system, she called to her team as they approached the water's edge. Watson with Thompson, Harrison with Mills. I'll sweep last position to ensure complete passage. The recommendation wasn't standard protocol, but it addressed their current limitations: diminished lung capacity from exhaustion, compromised situational awareness from sleep deprivation, and in Maya's case, the likelihood that cold water immersion would trigger severe tremors. Paired navigation provided mutual safety monitoring without sacrificing individual performance requirements. Mills nodded approval, instantly recognizing the tactical soundness of her suggestion. Execute as called. 30-second intervals between pairs. The water hit Maya like liquid electricity, immediately triggering violent tremors throughout her body. The neurological monitors taped to her skin registered the spike, transmitting real-time data to the medical team observing from their station nearby. Dr. Winters frowned at the readings, turning to Commander Marshall with evident concern. Her tremor intensity just doubled, he reported. Cold water immersion is creating a cascading neurological response. If this continues, she could lose basic motor function. Marshall studied the data display without immediate comment, then shifted his gaze to where Maya was preparing to enter the tunnels after her teammates. Continue monitoring. Intervention only if she shows signs of actual physical distress beyond the tremors. Maya waited at the tunnel entrance, watching as the last pair, Mills and Harrison, disappeared into the darkness. The tremors had intensified, exactly as she had anticipated, her hands shaking so violently that fine motor control had become almost impossible. Yet rather than fighting against this limitation, she had already adapted her approach. Where others would rely on hand movements to navigate the narrow underwater passage, she would use full body positioning and leg propulsion techniques she had developed during her rehabilitation when her hands had been almost completely non-functional. Taking one final deep breath, Maya submerged and entered the tunnel. The frigid water enveloped her completely, amplifying her tremors but also creating the weightless environment where her adapted techniques worked best. She moved through the narrow passage with a modified dolphin kick, using full body undulation rather than arm strokes to propel herself forward. Where the tunnel narrowed, requiring fine adjustments, she used her forearms instead of hands for guidance, compensating for her lack of digital dexterity with larger body movements. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The pain in her shoulder flared with each movement, sending sharp warnings that she methodically acknowledged and then compartmentalized, another technique developed during months of rehabilitation. Pain was information, not a command to stop. Information could be processed, prioritized, and sometimes temporarily set aside when mission requirements demanded it. Emerging from the tunnel after what seemed like an eternity underwater, Maya found her teammates waiting on the far side, their expressions reflecting surprise at how quickly she had navigated the obstacle despite her visible limitations. Efficient technique, Thompson observed with professional appreciation as she regained her feet. Water streaming from her uniform, Maya didn't waste breath on explanation. Next obstacle. 2-minute recovery, then move. The tremors remained pronounced as they proceeded to the second challenge, climbing wall that under normal circumstances would require significant grip strength and fine motor control. For someone with neurological tremors affecting their hands, it appeared almost impossibly daunting after nearly 6 days without proper rest. Maya studied the wall briefly, analyzing its construction while her teammates caught their breath. The standard approach would involve direct vertical climbing using the provided handholds, a technique that would be exceptionally difficult with her current tremor intensity. But there was an alternative for those who could see beyond conventional methods. Chimney technique on the corner junction, she suggested to Mills, pointing to where 2 sections of the wall created a narrow vertical channel. Compression climbing rather than grip-dependent holds. The technique she proposed was advanced, something taught in specialized military mountaineering courses rather than basic training. It involved using opposing pressure from back, legs, and shoulders to ascend between 2 vertical surfaces, minimizing reliance on finger grip strength. For someone with severe hand tremors, it offered a viable alternative to standard climbing methods. Mills assessed the wall, immediately recognizing the tactical validity of her suggestion. Good call. Thompson and Harrison have climbing backgrounds. They go standard route. Watson, you and Chun take the corner approach. They're not just completing the evolution, Briggs noted with quiet admiration. They're demonstrating actual operational capability under extreme adverse conditions. Marshall nodded agreement. And Chun's tremors have become essentially irrelevant to her performance. She's adapted so completely that what should be a disqualifying limitation has transformed into a specialized operating parameter. The final scenario presented the ultimate tactical challenge, a high-value target in a confined space with multiple environmental hazards and limited approach options. For a conventional team operating at full capacity, it would represent a difficult problem requiring precise execution. For candidates at the end of Hell Week, with bodies pushed far beyond normal human endurance limits, it should have been nearly impossible. Maya assessed the situation with the calm precision that had become her hallmark during the evolution. Her hands trembled violently, her shoulder throbbed with persistent pain, and the micro-hallucinations at her visual periphery had intensified with extreme fatigue. Yet her tactical analysis remained crystal clear. Single approach vector through East Corridor, she reported to Mills. Target likely aware of our presence based on previous engagement noise. Recommend specialized entry with simultaneous multi-point control rather than standard stack formation. The approach she suggested was advanced, something typically taught to experienced operators rather than candidates in basic training. It involved synchronized entry from multiple angles rather than the conventional linear approach, creating momentary disorientation for the target while maximizing team control options. Mills evaluated her recommendation with the critical assessment of someone who had led actual combat operations. After a moment's consideration, he nodded approval. Execute as recommended. Thompson maintained corridor security, remaining team members on simultaneous entry. Chun, you call timing. This final evolution, entrusting the critical timing element to the team member with the most visible physical limitation, represented the ultimate validation of Maya's journey through Hell Week. 6 days earlier, instructors and fellow candidates had dismissed her trembling hands as disqualifying weakness. Now those same hands would coordinate the timing for the most complex tactical maneuver of the entire evolution. Maya positioned herself at the optimal observation point, her breathing slowing to the controlled rhythm she had perfected during months of rehabilitation. The tremors remained present, a visible reminder of her physical condition, but they had been so thoroughly integrated into her operational approach that they no longer impacted her functional capability. On my mark, she announced, her voice steady despite her trembling body. 3, 2, 1. Execute. The team moved with synchronized precision, entering the room from multiple angles simultaneously and securing the final high-value target. before he could react to their presence. The maneuver was executed flawlessly, not just completed, but performed with the tactical proficiency of experienced operators rather than trainees at the end of a brutal selection process. Instructor Ramirez, playing the role of the primary, high-value target, found himself secured and controlled before he could implement any of the resistance scenarios he had prepared. As the exercise concluded, he made no attempt to hide his professional appreciation for their performance. "Outstanding tactical execution," he acknowledged as they secured the room according to protocol. "Adaptive problem-solving and effective. Team coordination under adverse conditions." With the building clearing exercise complete, Boat Crew 5 emerged into the morning sunlight, their bodies pushed beyond normal human endurance limits, but their mission accomplished according to all established parameters. They had not just survived the final evolution of Hell Week, they had demonstrated genuine operational capability despite extreme physical limitations. As they assembled for the final evaluation, Commander Marshall approached with Master Chief Briggs and the medical team. Rather than addressing the entire group, he moved directly to Maya's position. "Candidate Chen," he began formally, "Medical has continued monitoring your condition throughout the final evolution. Your neurological readings indicate you're operating well beyond safe tolerance thresholds for your condition." Maya stood at attention despite her exhaustion, her hands trembling visibly, but her expression remaining composed. "I completed all required evolutions, sir." "You did more than complete them," Marshall corrected. "You adapted specialized tactics to overcome significant physical limitations while maintaining operational effectiveness. More importantly, you shared those adaptations with your team, enhancing their collective capability rather than focusing solely on individual performance." He turned to address the entire boat crew. Hell Week is designed to identify those with the physical and mental fortitude required for special operations. But its deeper purpose is to reveal those who can function effectively when everything goes wrong, when bodies fail, when standard approaches collapse, when nothing works as planned. Marshall's gaze returned to Maya, taking in her trembling hands and the rigid posture that barely concealed her pain. "Candidate Chen has demonstrated something even more valuable than conventional performance metrics. She has shown that limitations, even significant physical limitations, can be overcome through adaptation, specialized techniques, and tactical innovation." Dr. Winters stepped forward with the tablet displaying Maya's medical data. "Your tremor patterns have actually established a new baseline for performance under adverse conditions," he informed her with evident professional interest. "The adaptive techniques you've developed have applications beyond your individual case, potential benefits for operators dealing with combat injuries or neurological impacts from traumatic brain injury. The recognition that her methods might help others might provide pathways for wounded warriors to maintain operational capability despite physical limitations," struck Maya with unexpected emotional force. Throughout Hell Week, she had focused exclusively on her personal mission, honoring her fallen teammates by completing what they could not. The possibility that her journey might create opportunities for others had never entered her calculations. Master Chief Briggs addressed the assembled candidates, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had seen countless SEAL candidates come and go. "Hell Week is officially concluded. Those still standing have earned the right to continue SEAL training. Report to medical for final evaluation. Then you are directed to stand down for 24 hours of monitored recovery." As the candidates dispersed toward the medical station, Thompson fell into step beside Maya. "Your hands are still shaking," he observed quietly. "They always will," she replied with simple acceptance. "That's not what matters." "What does matter?" he asked. Maya glanced at her trembling hands, then at the team that had evolved from skeptical strangers to something approaching brothers through their shared ordeal. "Not what you can't do," she answered. "What you can do despite it." The medical evaluation confirmed what Maya already knew. Her body had been pushed far beyond normal human tolerance thresholds. The hairline fracture in her clavicle had worsened. Under continued stress, the neurological tremors had established new intensity patterns that might become permanent, and her overall physical condition reflected the cumulative impact of nearly 6 days of continuous exertion without proper rest or nutrition. Yet as she sat on the examination table, allowing the medical team to document her condition, Maya experienced something unexpected, a profound sense of peace that transcended physical discomfort. She had not just survived Hell Week. She had redefined what was possible for someone with her condition. More importantly, she had honored the memory of her fallen teammates by refusing to surrender to limitations that others had deemed disqualifying. Commander Marshall entered the medical station as the evaluation concluded, his expression thoughtful as he reviewed her final assessment. "The tremors are worse than when you started," he noted. "Yes, sir," Maya acknowledged without elaboration. "And likely to remain at elevated levels for some time, possibly permanently." "Yes, sir." Marshall studied her for a moment, seeing beyond the physical manifestation of her condition to the deeper implications of her performance throughout Hell Week. "You know, when your application first crossed my desk, I had significant reservations. Not because you're a woman, we've had female candidates before, but because the medical documentation suggested your neurological condition would be fundamentally incompatible with special operations requirements." He set down the tablet containing her medical data. "I've never been happier to be proven wrong. You haven't just completed Hell Week, you've potentially changed how we evaluate operational capability in candidates with non-standard physical profiles." Maya absorbed this information with the same quiet focus she had maintained throughout the ordeal. "The team succeeded, sir. Individual performance is secondary." "Precisely the point," Marshall agreed. "And the most valuable lesson from this: evolution. Now get some rest, candidate. You've earned it." As Maya finally lay down on a recovery cot, allowing her exhausted body to relax for the first time in nearly 6 days, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The helicopter crash that had left her with permanent nerve damage, the months of painful rehabilitation when she couldn't hold a pen steady, the doctors who had told her she would never meet the physical standards required for regular military duty, let alone special operations. Throughout that journey, she had clung to Captain Lin's final words before the radio went silent: "Finish the mission." Those words had sustained her through countless hours of painful rehabilitation, through moments of doubt when the tremors seemed insurmountable, through the skeptical looks and dismissive comments when she first arrived at Bud's training. Now, as sleep finally claimed her, Maya realized she had done more than simply finish the mission. She had transformed it into something greater, a demonstration that physical limitations need not define operational capability, that adaptive techniques could overcome conventional constraints, that the true measure of a warrior was not physical perfection, but the capacity to function effectively despite imperfection. 6 days earlier, Navy SEALs had mocked the trembling woman they assumed would wash out in the first hours of Hell Week. Now, that same woman had completed the most brutally demanding military training in the world, setting performance records, despite physical limitations that should have made such achievement impossible. Lieutenant Commander Blackwood returned to the training center 3 days later as the candidates were resuming modified training following their recovery period. He sought out Master Chief Briggs, curiosity finally overcoming his professional pride. "Heard Chun made it through," he said, attempting to sound casual. "Didn't expect that outcome." Briggs regarded him with measured assessment. "She didn't just make it through. She established new tactical approaches for candidates operating with physical limitations. Her boat crew had the highest performance metrics in the final evolution, despite multiple injuries and her ongoing neurological condition." Blackwood absorbed this information with visible reassessment of his earlier judgment. The tremors? Still present, likely permanent. Briggs gestured toward the training yard, where Maya was methodically working through modified shooting techniques with her trembling hands. But essentially irrelevant to her operational capability. She's developed specialized methods that compensate so effectively that the limitation becomes almost invisible in performance metrics. As they watched, Maya completed a shooting sequence that would challenge even candidates without neurological issues. Her hands trembled visibly as she prepared, but when she executed the actual firing sequence, something remarkable happened, a moment of perfect stillness between heartbeats, a fraction of a second where limitation gave way to flawless execution. That shouldn't be possible, Blackwood observed with professional appreciation. None of what she's accomplished should be possible, Briggs agreed. That's precisely why she belongs here. Later that evening, as candidates prepared for the the next phase of training, Maya sat quietly cleaning her equipment with the same methodical precision she applied to every task. Her hands still trembled, sometimes violently, but she had long since learned to work around this limitation rather than being defined by it. Mills approached, sitting beside her without interrupting her work. For several minutes, they existed. In comfortable silence, the kind that develops between those who have suffered together and emerged stronger for the experience. "Why SEAL training?" he finally asked. "With your Force Recon background and Silver Star, you could have pursued dozens of other pathways. Why choose the one that would highlight your physical limitation most obviously?" Maya continued her methodical equipment maintenance, considering the question carefully before answering. "When the helicopter went down and I was the only survivor, I had two choices: accept the limitation or find a way through it. The doctors said I'd never shoot straight again, never meet special operations standards, never overcome the tremors." She set down her cleaning cloth, holding out her hands to display the tremors that remained her constant companion. They were right about the tremors, but wrong about everything else. Sometimes the most valuable capability isn't physical perfection, it's the capacity to adapt when perfection isn't possible. Mills nodded understanding. "And now?" "Now we continue training," Maya replied simply. "The mission isn't finished yet." As night fell over the training compound, Maya Chen, Force Recon Marine, helicopter crash survivor, and now SEAL candidate who had completed hell, weak with a broken clavicle and hands that never stopped trembling, prepared for the challenges that lay ahead. Her journey was far from over, but she had already accomplished something more valuable than simply surviving the most demanding military training in existence. She had demonstrated that limitation need not equal disability, that adaptation could overcome conventional constraints, and that sometimes the strongest warriors are those who have already been broken but refuse to stay shattered. The trembling in her hands would likely remain for life, a visible reminder of all she had lost in that helicopter crash. But Maya had transformed this limitation into something more profound, a symbol of resilience that spoke not of weakness, but of the extraordinary strength required to function effectively despite imperfection. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.